Well, in this tutorial, I'd like to quickly show you how you can define scenarios for requirements in order to start preparing for test cases. This process is called, this tutorial is called scenario-based test design and test management in Rommana, because in Rommana we do not really create test cases directly for requirements, because we understand that requirements are always incomplete, high level, vague, missing details. So the Rommana test design methodology relies on the fact that we are going to take a requirement, we're going to build a number of scenarios, and for those scenarios, for each one of those scenarios, we're going to be building test cases. So this chart here, which is explained well in another tutorial, I just want to show you that piece. Right here, here's a function requirement. We're going to take a requirement right now and building a scenario. By the way, when we build the requirements from scenarios, when we build scenarios from requirements directly, we call them non-use case scenarios. However, as you can see also, you can take a requirement, you can build use cases, and for each use case, you can create use case scenarios. Once you have either non-use case scenarios or use case scenarios, then you can start building your test cases. And the test cases, as you can see, this line here comes down here, or from non-use case scenarios, you can go and build test cases. So for now, I'm going to show you how you just do this part here, creating scenarios for requirements. In order to do that, I'm going to go back now to my requirement screen here. And I had created a requirement here, which I called it place order. Okay, this is a requirement called the place order, very simple. And here's the definition of the requirement, very high level that does not provide much details. Now, here's how you can go about building your scenarios. As I said, we can either build non-use case scenarios here or use case scenarios under the use cases. So I'm going to go here and click on new, which will take me to the scenario screen to create a number of non-use case scenarios. Let me very quick define for you that a scenario in Rommana is nothing more than any condition or any situation that could possibly happen in production that the system will have to deal with. So I'm going to give a scenario name here. I'm going to have to say place or order for something. All right. Sorry. We have in stock. Okay. All right. And I can provide a description here if I want, but I can see if I feel like my scenario name is descriptive enough, I can leave it at that. I can also provide an expected behavior if I believe that expected behavior is not obvious. But in this case, you know, if you, I mean, remember, potentially we're going to take those scenarios and take them in two different directions. One direction is the scenario would be given to developers to make sure that they have code to handle this scenario. And of course, if I provide description, if I provide expected behavior, then the developer knows what to do. At the same time, the same scenario would go to the test team to build test cases. That's why once we save the scenario, we can see that we can create test cases for that. Again, one more time, I don't see a reason for this very simple case to put a description or expected behavior. Now, of course, you can put an expected behavior, and in the scenario review process, which is going to be explained in a different tutorial, you can have different people giving you a different opinion about is that really the expected behavior or not. So we'll leave it at that. You can see the requirement is stated here. This is for requirement number 2. And actually, once I specify the scenario name, the default for the scenario type here is a narrative. There are other types of scenarios that will be handled also in other tutorials. But now for risk-based testing, you could also specify how important that scenario is for testing, and Rommana will calculate a testing priority. For now, since I'm not doing any risk-based testing in that tutorial, I'll leave it at that. I'll just go ahead and save the scenario definition. Very simple. So creating scenarios in Rommana is just straightforward. It's adding scenario name, scenario description, expected behavior. And as I said, the second two fields are optional. Now you can see the scenario screen, and you can see now Down here are the test cases that we can define and the ad hoc tests we can define, because in Rommana, when you design tests, you can design ad hoc tests or you can design test cases. Okay, those are going to come later on in the tutorial of how to create test cases for scenarios. But for now, let me show you how to go further and create more scenarios. Now, since we are in the scenario screen, it shows us here on the top that we're looking at a scenario number 1 from requirement number 2. I'm going to click here, and say, okay, that's another scenario. And I start adding scenarios like that. And scenarios can be one line that simply is a scenario name. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's say, place order for something we do not have in stock. All right, I believe I'm okay with the spelling. Otherwise, I can run the spelling checker here. So let me save. Okay, I don't have to do anything else. So we made the scenario screen very simple, such that people can use it to add scenarios very quick. That's all. That's all what you have to do. In a future version of Rommana, we are actually importing bulk of scenarios from a Word document. So I got two scenarios here. Let me just add one more here, okay, just for fun, because for the next one, so here I can write some description, but I can also write some expected behavior. What do I say? Message to ask if we should place the order anyway. And let a customer know when it arrives. You know what I mean here. I'm coming up with a scenario that is not even mentioned in the requirement, okay? Because remember, the purpose of a scenario is to add more and more and more details than what's in the requirement. So since I'm adding that scenario, I have to put here what I believe to be a reasonable expected behavior. Remember, I'm not deciding the expected behavior. I'm just giving my idea. And later on, we're going to put this scenario out, actually all the scenarios out for review, and then people can look at the requirement, people can look at the scenario, and maybe the business analyst is going to come back and says, oh no, that is not the expected behavior. The expected behavior is that a message says, sorry, we don't have that item, whatever. All right. So I think as a tester, as a business analyst, as a developer who is putting that scenario out, I have to put what I believe to be the expected behavior. And the reason I'm putting it there is to open some discussion about it. If I leave it blank, then the developer would not know how to implement the scenario. The tester does not know when they write their test cases, what to expect as far as results. Let me just click on a spelling checker here, just make sure that I did not make any typo mistakes here. And I will go ahead now and save my scenario. And by the way, if you're wondering when do we review scenarios, we don't review scenarios by themselves. In the requirement screen, if you look at the requirement screen, you'll find that something that says review this requirement and the scenarios, because the scenarios always have to be reviewed in the context of the requirement. Let me save this here. And so on. I can add as many scenarios as I can this way. And of course, the nice thing about it is that, as I always teach people, developing scenarios should be teamwork, which means anyone can go ahead and develop and put a scenario. And when it comes to time to review scenarios, and we can get comments from people, and people can go ahead and say, you have few more scenarios missing, or you need to add a scenario about this, you need to add a scenario about this, and so on. So for now, really, all what I did so far, I don't know what I did here. I was just closing that window. So let me go back here. Okay. So for now, really, all that I did, I created two scenarios. If I were to, and saved them, if I were to click here, and remember always the traceability. So this is tracing the scenarios back to requirements. And if you look on the left here, I am looking at the scenarios here. Okay, this is very interesting. The user interface is just interesting thing. On the top, you see the entity you are working on, which is scenarios. Above it, you see the parent entity, which in this case is the requirement. So if I were to click on this one, I'll see the requirement tree. Now at the bottom, you see all the entities that are considered to be children of the current entity, which in this case are test cases, because I can take a scenario, I create test cases. Now as you can see, that's why going back here to the diagram, it's very interesting. Here is a requirement, here is scenario, here is test cases. If I'm looking at scenarios, on the top, I can see requirements, which means I can go back to the requirements. At the bottom, I can see test cases. Now going back here, this is really how the Rommana interface works. I can, one more time, if I click in here, I go to the specific requirement. I go to the specific requirement that this scenario was created for, which is requirement number 2. If I click here, I go back to the requirement tree and highlighting that requirement. In fact, the result is the same. I'm sorry. So here, if I go back here, so this showing, sorry. So I'm gonna click on here to go back to the requirement. So when I click here, you see what happening here? It should be the function requirements, it should be the quality requirements, and I did not define any of those, and it is highlighting it. So I'm right now in looking at which requirement this scenario belongs at. If I want to really go to the specific requirement screen, I will click on here to hear the to see actually the requirement where that scenario was defined. If I were to scroll down here, you can see the list of the scenarios out here. And of course, as you can see, I can click on any one of them and to see the details. That's all what we need to do about scenarios. So I'm going to click here, go to scenario number 1. So the traceability between the requirements and scenario is straightforward. All right. Now, since we can now very quick here look at the risk-based testing. Or let's so here you can specify the frequency of occurrence. You can as high, medium, or low. You can specify the impact of failure of this scenario, and you can specify the probability of failure. And based on these 3 things, Rommana will calculate a number. I'm just clicking on any one of those here. We'll explain them on the scenario, on the risk-based testing in Rommana. You can see that based on these 3 values, Rommana had calculated for you already a testing priority. We will explain this in details in the tutorial that has to do with risk-based testing in scenarios, and also we're going to talk about how to create ad hoc tests and how to create tests for a given scenario. Let me save this scenario here after I changed that. So I now have 2 scenarios, and you can create any number of scenarios. The expectation is that you take a requirement, you add large number of scenarios, and because the more scenarios you can define for a requirement, the more detailed we have for the requirement, the better job the development can do, the more test cases the test team can write and execute, and of course, the more predictable and more reliable your software, your release is going to be.